All right, everybody, welcome back to the Heath Barn. Hope we've had a great day. This is episode 124, and I had the honor and the privilege to have the public address announcer of the Chicago Bears, Chicago Bulls, Chicago Fire, the University of Illinois men's basketball team. He has been the public address announcer at 4 of the last 5 NBA All-Star weekends. He was the public address announcer in the bubble. Before that, Pacers, all kinds of stuff. Amazing resume. It is Tim Sinclair. And it's very, very happy he came in. We had a great time. I did a little bit of editing on this one, and everything comes out fine, except for one. You know my technology skills. There's a part about halfway through where we're talking about Illinois players. I'm talking about Andres Feliz, who, if you're an Illinois fan, you know he was a stud about 3 years ago. I'm talking about him. Then I tried to edit, and then it immediately goes into someone who I said is just came along 30 years too late and would have been a top 5 pick in the NBA draft. Now, the part that I cut off accidentally was me saying Kofi Cockburn. So, when you listen to this, it's going to say, you're going to think that I think Feliz would have been a top 5 pick in the NBA draft 30 years ago. When in fact, I'm talking about Kofi Cockburn. Just wanted to get that out there. Besides that, everything's just smooth sailing and everything went great. So, I want to thank Tim Sinclair for coming on the pod. Extremely grateful. He was great. You're going to love this pod because there's a lot of stuff in there, a lot of little inside stories, little things like that about, just about him and all of the cool stuff he's gotten to do. So, hope you enjoy it. Thank you for listening. Thank you, Tim Sinclair. Hit it. All right. Tim Sinclair. Awesome. Thank you for being here.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
I was going to ask you, okay, let's pretend somebody's like, okay, oh, there's Tim Sinclair on this pod. I don't know anything about him. Where would you start as far as just kind of like your upbringing, what got you into all this? And after that, we'll get into more fun stuff. But I mean, just kind of give everybody a little bit of your background with everything.
Well, I was born and raised in Detroit. So I was there for 11 years of my life for the most part. So ironically grew up a Michigan fan, a Pistons fan, a Lions fan, Tigers fan, all the teams that people in Illinois love to hate. Mm-hmm. And then we moved. I was in junior high when we came to the Mahomet area, and slowly but surely my allegiances started to shift.
Right.
It happened to be 1989.
Yeah.
When we moved.
Yeah, that's a good year.
So that year for Illinois, obviously,
right.
Michigan beats them in the Final Four. So I came in on this high, like my team beat your team kind of thing.
So you were Michigan back then. Still, yeah.
When we moved here, I was,
yeah.
And certainly by junior high and high school, I'd been around Illinois athletics enough to have changed my allegiances.
Right.
But that was also 89 and 90 are when the Pistons won the World Championships, and then it switched to the Bulls taking over for 6 of the next 8 years. So I moved at a great time where I could enjoy the success of Michigan and of the Pistons. And then when I got to Illinois, I could sort of change and not be a fair weather fan. I was changing because I lived here, and the rest is history, I guess, on that.
I don't think I've ever heard of anybody who's like, because the Pistons and the Bulls, man, it doesn't get much more hatred than that. And it's like you're doing one, then you got to switch over to the other. That's yeah.
When you're 11, it's a little easier than when you're 40.
That's true.
But
and then you also, like you said, you also had the Flying Illini Michigan deal going too. So that's crazy to have to switch over. But did you? So then you graduated from Mahomet.
I did. Graduated in 96.
Right.
So aging myself a little bit. But
me too. I told you we're both
right,
96ers. When's your birthday? See who's older.
April 29th.
Nice. I'm March 19th, so okay. I'm like...
Just a hair older.
Yeah.
Just a hair.
Yeah. So you just had your... Yeah, we don't need to say what year,
yeah,
whatever.
It's a lot. Nothing should be that old, but I am.
Oh, well, yeah. So then whenever you went to, did you go to U of I then? And then
I did. I studied architecture. I thought for sure that's what I was going to do with my life. Got into the architecture program, which is super demanding at Illinois especially. And by the end of my freshman year, I kind of realized I needed some money to buy food and gas and things.
Great.
And happened to know somebody in radio. And I was just like, hey, can I help out a couple hours a week on the weekends kind of thing to make some extra money? And he said, do you want to be on the air?
Yeah.
And I was like, sure. That wasn't really what I was thinking necessarily, but yeah, if you'll let me, why not?
That's kind of the end game everybody's looking for. Though,
yeah, and I mean, for me, it was like, I'll organize CDs or sweep floor, like whatever. It didn't matter to me. And so he let me on the air, an overnight shift, right before my first college final of that second semester.
And what station was that?
WBGL. So it was a contemporary Christian station locally, but it was a network.
What was
91.7 in Champaign.
Yeah. 91.7. Yep, absolutely.
And so full circle, I ended up back there a bunch of years later doing the morning show for a network of stations for about 8 years.
Yeah.
But that was really where I went, maybe my love for architecture is switching to a love of communication and using my voice to share a message of some sort. And so that really sort of turned the tables for me, and I guess the rest is history.
Right. And then did you go to Alabama? Or?
I was in Alabama for a few years.
I've got a guest on. It's got a Wikipedia, so that's big. That's big. That's big for me. No,
yes, I do.
No, but yeah. But you never know how much of that's
It's accurate. I have seen it. It's accurate. At least last time I checked, it was accurate.
Yeah.
I was in Alabama for a few years. I was in Baton Rouge, Louisiana for a few years.
Nice.
I did radio in Chicago for a few years, and then ended up back in Champaign for the bulk of my broadcasting career.
Right. And then so then what was your first? Well, before I get into the PA stuff, like, were you, once you were really getting into it, were you wanting to do like play-by-play, or were you just kind of seeing what was out there? Because as a PA announcer, obviously that's a different gig than just doing actually calling the game and stuff. Yep. So what was your main? Were you just kind of like, I'm down for whatever, or or was there a certain avenue you wanted to take more?
I had no plans. It was not a, hey, I should get into sports. I thought I was going to be doing morning radio on some sort of music formatted station forever.
Yeah.
And it was Brian Barnhart, ironically, years ago, who said, it was right when Jim Shepard was stepping away from Illinois. He said, hey, they're looking for some new PA guys. You should apply. You like sports. You talk for a living. It'd be great. I was like, all right.
Yeah.
So I filled out an application. I made up a tape. Like, I obviously didn't have anything to provide them with of stuff I'd actually done.
Yeah.
And sent that over, and it was like a year. Like, nobody said anything to me. Mike Cation had already been hired to do basketball.
Yeah.
And so it was just like radio silence.
Yeah.
And they asked me to come do a baseball game. Great. I'll go do baseball.
Right.
And I was terrible at that too, but I liked it.
Right.
And so Illinois, for whatever reason, started giving me more opportunities. And again, I didn't have a goal.
Right.
I was just like, I want to do fun stuff.
Yeah.
And sitting at a sporting event and talking and getting paid to do it, whether it was in a few dollars an hour or nachos or whatever I was getting, that was cool to me.
Right.
And so I started doing baseball and swimming and diving and wrestling and eventually, every sport that Illinois has.
Really? Swimming and diving, yeah, that'd be... So, okay. So was your first kind of bigger gig, you did the Illini Women's, was that the first kind of basketball? I mean, as far as like basketball, was that the main...
Yeah, it depends on how you define bigger, but yes, beyond the quote-unquote Olympic sports.
Right, yeah, no, I shouldn't be like that. But it was the first basketball gig you got was Illinois Women's, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
That was 2012, I think.
Yeah.
And I did that for 10 years.
Really? I didn't know that. And then, okay, so then go ahead and tell everybody get to the good stuff, like all the big time stuff you're doing now.
Well, the jobs I currently have,
yeah.
I'm the public address voice of Illinois basketball, of the Chicago Bulls, Chicago Bears, and Chicago Fire, the Big Ten championship football game, the NBA 2K video games, and then the Illinois high school state championships, and a few other things here and there. The NBA All-Star Weekend.
That's what I have. Yeah, I have questions. One thing I didn't know you did was the soccer games. Like, do you know a lot about soccer, or is it because I'm a soccer guy? But for you to be able to do that too, it's just kind of a jack of all trades.
When I was applying for the job, backing way up in 2011, the Cubs had a contest for the next PA voice at Wrigley Field, and they said, we're going to do this YouTube contest.
Yeah.
For people, anybody who wants to apply can apply. Read through this script on camera, upload it to YouTube, and we're going to choose one. Well, for my radio show at the time on WBGL, I was doing mornings there. We were like, we want to talk about this because we had a station in Chicago, and so I'm just going to apply for fun so we can kind of talk about the process.
Right.
So I applied for fun. Long story short, I ended up getting second place out of 3,000 people.
Yeah.
Didn't get the job, but I did get the confidence to believe that maybe I could do something like that in the future.
Definitely.
A couple years later, the Fire did the exact same thing to look for a new PA guy, and I got that one.
Yeah.
But in that process, I worked a few Illinois soccer matches. That was it.
Right.
And so I was terrified, like, they're going to say, so what's your soccer experience? I'm going to go, pretty much nothing.
Right.
And that was going to be it. But I learned, and from a PA perspective, it's a little easier than if I was doing play-by-play.
It's kind of like just name,
Yeah,
right?
I introduce cards, substitutions, goals.
Yeah.
In college, it's actually more, you say when there's a foul or a corner kick or if it was offside. You don't do any of that in pro soccer.
Really? Gotcha. All right. Well, and farm commercial, I saw that, and I was like, I felt like we were watching a regional commercial at the time, and I was like, I think that's a national one.
It absolutely was.
Yeah. Yes, that was awesome. And I have to say too, Benny the Bull's got to be on my Mount Rushmores of mascots. Cause,
for sure.
Yeah, I mean, my son, like I said, I told you before, he's in the first grade now, but in the last year or two, I've showed him YouTube videos of him, just of Benny the Bull, and I don't know who's under there, but he's in shape because I mean, he's amazing. He's one of the best ones.
Agreed. Yeah. He's Benny's the best for sure.
Yeah. All right. Well, some things I was going to ask you. You were in the bubble, so maybe talk about that a little bit, and talk about not just being in there, but maybe like kind of like your daily routine and that, and how weird was it to be like, in front of all 12 of you, we got, Damian Lillard, I mean, So what was all that like? Because I felt like that was obviously an insane time, but also being a PA announcer in that bubble. And then they obviously thought a lot of you for you to even get to be there. So, yeah.
Yeah, it was nice to be asked for sure. I went for a couple of reasons. One, the world had come to a grinding halt, and I didn't have a job, really, because all sports had been shut down. So that was one reason. The other reason we kind of knew it was going to be history, some sort of historical event that hopefully we'd never have to do again, but that everybody would talk about for forever. And so when they invited me to go, I, of course, said yes. And I called it NBA summer camp. It's like everybody stays in these dorms or pods. Now, we each had our own room, but it was on a Disney resort. And you could go swim, you could ride bikes, you could go on a hike around the lake, you could, all that kind of stuff. You had the mess hall, so to speak, where you would go get food.
Yeah.
And then you would go on these little field trips where you would get on a bus and go to an NBA game.
Yeah.
Now, we were working them, of course, but it was us and all the officials, and half of the NBA players were at our resort. The other half were at the other resort.
Really?
So you'd be walking around and walk by LeBron James and Anthony Davis. It was just like, it was very weird.
Oh, yeah.
It got a little more normal after a couple months, but it was still odd.
Yeah.
The goal of the arenas, even though there was really nobody there other than team executives and whatever, was to try to make the games feel as real as possible for those guys. And so PA was there. Whoever was supposed to be the home team, that's who I was cheering for. So I did a Lakers home game, quote unquote, in the bubble, even though 2 games later the Lakers were playing and I was doing it for the Pelicans or whoever. We were just going to be excited for whoever the home team was and then not for the other team. And I think they did about as good a job as they could. We could pipe in crowd noise, and they had banners and graphics, and but it was a wild time, and I still don't think I've probably will fully process how big of a deal that was for another 15 or 20 years, just because it was still fairly recent. Yeah, but we had a blast.
Oh yeah, I can't imagine. Well, and they did a good job. Here's what I think. You look back at it now, and it seems like that whole deal was insane. But then when you looked at it at the time, and after a couple of months, you started to get used to it, And at the time, it didn't seem that weird.
Yep.
And then they started piping in noise and all that kind of stuff. So it didn't seem. But you look back at it now, it's just like, how did we do any of that? But for you to get to be able to do that and just be around that whole situation, that's awesome. Yeah. Did you? Let me get to my questions here. I was going to ask you too, those All-Star weekends, maybe talk about those a little bit. Maybe tell everybody how many you've done, and then I'll ask you some questions about how crazy all that was too. But
yeah, I've been fortunate enough to do 4 different All-Star weekends so far, and I've been in the league 6 years. So
they pick. I just assumed it was whoever's hosting, it would just be their guy, but that's
for a long time.
Yeah.
At least the guy who did the game was the local person.
Yeah.
But there are other events. There's the celebrity game and All-Star Saturday Night and things like that. So I don't know how it's always been. All I know is I was working for the Pacers, so before I started for the Bulls.
Right.
I was at an event, and one of the NBA people came up to me and said, "What are you doing in February?" And I knew that meant the All-Star game, and I said, "Whatever you want me to be doing."
Oh, yeah.
And that was the Chicago All-Star weekend of 2020, right before the world shut down.
Right.
And they had me do All-Star Saturday Night and the game because Tommy, who used to do the Bulls, had just left.
Yeah.
And so there wasn't really a full-time person in there for the Bulls, so they asked me if I would do it, despite the fact that I'd only been in the NBA for like a year.
Yeah.
That ended up kind of being a de facto tryout for the Bulls and the Bears, actually. I didn't really know it at the time.
Right.
But that was my first one. The next year, everything was in Atlanta, so I couldn't have even worked it because of COVID. They just had the Atlanta crew do it, and there was no fans. It was a very different kind of weekend.
Yeah.
But then 22 was in Cleveland. That was the 75th celebration.
Yeah. Did you announce all?
Yeah.
Oh
so
my gosh.
The TNT thing of all the guys walking out onto that stage, that was my voice the whole time.
I should have known that. I don't know why I didn't even think about that. That's crazy.
So I got to do that. And then 23 was Utah. And I was out at Salt Lake City and did All-Star Saturday Night for that, which is really the most intensive of all of them anyway. Yeah. If I had to choose, I would choose All-Star Saturday Night. Your voice is on TV way more. Mm-hmm. It's way more fun. It's
so at 2022,
harder.
At 2022, you did not do the Saturday Night, but
I just did the game on.
But you got to introduce.
But I got to do the 75th.
Oh my gosh!
And then I did All-Star Saturday Night for 23, and then this last year in wherever we were, Indy. Yeah. I did All-Star Saturday Night, and I did the celebrity game.
Yeah.
So,
man,
it's been a lot of fun.
No kidding. Yeah. Okay. So whenever you're doing those All-Star Saturday Nights, you've got all the players on the front row, and all that kind of stuff. Any like story that kind of pops in your head a little bit, as far as a famous person or somebody or just anything that's happened down there, because I remember. Well, we're the same age. Remember growing up, you'd watch those dunk contests, and you'd have, and my favorite one growing up. I don't know about you, and it wasn't the best one because the Jordan ones were great. But I just remember when we were like 13, that one where D Brown beat Sean Kemp in the finals.
Pumped up the shoes.
Yeah, pumped up the shoes and all that. But like that's kind of when I really started. Taped it on the VCR, blah blah blah. Watched it back a bunch of times.
Yep.
But you've got all those guys on the front row going crazy, and then they end up right there by where I'm assuming you were. So I didn't know as anything. You got any kind of?
I mean, the interaction is limited because I'm working, and so I'm very focused on what I'm doing. But yeah, I mean, everybody's right there. Typically I can't see because Shaq is 2 feet in front of me standing or whatever.
Yeah.
So, Dwayne Wade and they're all of them are there. Giannis doesn't matter.
Right.
I think the 2022 one, when we had all 75 of the greatest players of all time, the ones who are still living there, before the event, I had like run into the bathroom to just, okay, you don't have much time to do it during the event. So like last minute, going to do that. And by the time I had walked in and walked out, I had had brief conversations with Clyde Drexler, John Stockton, Bill Walton, Hakeem Olajuwon.
Yeah.
I feel like there were one or two other. It was just everywhere you turned, you were running into a Hall of Famer and a legend in the game. And so things like, and Usher was there, and so and Shaq and Ernie Johnson and all those guys.
Right.
So you have little brief interactions with them.
Yeah.
Typically, again, mainly because I'm working, they're out there screwing around most of the time. But
absolutely,
I've got so much to worry about that it's hard to pull away from that too much.
Yeah. But I mean, coming from like Muhammad, do you ever just kind of sit back for a second and be like, man, I got, like this is some big time stuff here, and I'm right here in the middle of it. I mean, does it ever kind of dawn on you, like, man, like, because for somebody that went into architecture, and now you're doing all this, I mean, that's,
Yeah, I would, while I'm doing it, no.
Yeah.
But when I'm driving into downtown Chicago, which is my favorite city in the world, I love Chicago.
Right.
And the skyline's amazing, and you're coming up 57 into 9094, and it's sort of opening up in front of you. Every time I go, there are millions and millions and millions of people who live here.
Right.
And I'm the guy? It's still, to me, is mind-boggling and doesn't necessarily make sense. I have that imposter syndrome you hear people talking about, like I have somehow tricked people into believing I'm good enough to do this.
Right.
But
fake it till you make it.
I'm gonna keep faking it as long as it'll serve me well, and it has so far.
Yeah, that's awesome. The first time I saw, this may have been around quarantine time, but my wife and I, we were watching CI Living. That's the first time yeah. And I didn't even know when you were doing that you did all the announcing or anything, but you did that for how long, a year or two, and just kind of.
It was almost 4, actually.
Was it really?
In total? Yeah.
I'm surprised with your schedule.
Well, they were gracious. Like most employers, I think, would have been like, if you're not going to be here 30 or 40% of the time, then, you could just hit the road. But they were like, hey, as long as you want to stay, you be gone when you need to be gone, and then when you come back, you got a spot. So they were great. But eventually, it was too hard for me to always feel like I had to be back from 1 to 5 every afternoon. And, to Heather and the crew over there who are doing the rest of it, like there's extra work they have to do if I'm not there. And people watching too, like a show hosted by one person is very different than a show hosted by two. So eventually I was like, look, when you find somebody, I'll step away. And so it worked out great. But they were very, very good to me in all of that.
Right. There was one sport that you could listen or watch.
Ooh.
And then who would you want to be calling it?
So I played basketball in high school. I do more basketball every year than anything. So because of that, and because I am literally on the court, center court for Bulls games and Illini games, I love that environment because I feel like I get to experience it like the coaches and players do.
Yeah.
Whereas football and soccer, you're in a press box removed and kind of watching it happen in front of you. So I like basketball for that reason. Yeah. Football is hard to do, and so that part of it I enjoy.
So after football, you're saying 3-yard gain, or right? I mean, you're calling
everything
after
that happens.
Play.
Yep.
So I've gone to it.
And even if nothing happens, like pass intended for,
right? Yeah.
Like if it's incomplete, you're still saying who they were targeting, what the new down and distance are.
Yeah, that's a lot more.
And there's 22 guys on the field instead of 10. They're wearing helmets. They're farther away.
Absolutely.
And they're constantly running in and out. So if when you think you know who the running back is or the tight end is, they've swapped them out, and now you've got to figure out. So in that case, it's a lot harder to do, and it's longer, and all those.
So a lot more preparation, I'm assuming.
Yeah,
for
there's just more names.
Right.
Yeah, more names.
But had it been pretty cool to watch Io this whole time.
Yeah, that's been never expected he was going to get drafted
Oh,
by
I
the
know.
Bulls.
Well, him dropping that much, that was ridiculous. But
Agreed.
Yeah.
But I thought maybe I was only going to get 2 years of him
Right.
in Illinois, and for a while there, I guess he can be one and done, blah, blah.
Right.
So he stayed 3, which was awesome, and then gets drafted by the Bulls, and now he's been there 3 years and has a few more years
Right.
on his contract. So to get to be front and center for his career trajectory has been
Right.
amazing, and it's fun that it's a fun call for me. Is how we say his name, and the
Right.
crowd, introducing him as from Chicago. In Chicago, people just eat that up. So
Right.
it's been great.
I feel like he's got a shot to. I mean, he's good. And this past year, I'm not going to have your company man. I'm not going to have you say your opinions on the Bulls. But after a certain guy that the ball stopped with him all the time got hurt, and he's the one playing anymore, I felt like Io had the chance. And he's got a chance to make a lot of money and play for a long time. And it also
does.
after that second year, it kind of seemed like it was you didn't know what was going to happen, whatever. But then he's this year, like I said, after Levine was out and stuff like that, he got a chance to really play. I mean, he's great.
He had a bit of a sophomore slump.
Yeah.
His first year, he was benefited by Lonzo Ball getting hurt. Mm-hmm. So all of a sudden, he's starting as a rookie when most people thought he was going to be in the G League.
Right.
And then second year was a little tougher for him, but he worked on his shot and he worked on finishing at the rim and learning what he's good at. And this last year, you saw that in spades. He really took a giant step this year, and you're right. There's a lot of money to be made if he wants it.
I think that he. I was listening to him. They have a shooting coach, and he was helping Kobe White too, I believe. Yeah, I can't think of his name.
Peter Patton.
Yeah. So, but yeah, Io. I mean, what do you think his ceiling could be? I'm not saying he could be an all-star, but I'm saying he could be a guy that gets you 15, 16 a game and plays good defense and 5-6 assists. He can be a.
And he's a pretty decent rebounder too. I mean, I think he's a 15, 7, and 6 kind of guy.
I agree. Yeah.
Pretty often anyway. Yeah. But he's also that guy who, as we saw, could get you 30 or 32.
True.
Certain games when he's got advantageous matchups.
Right. Yeah. If he gets the ball in his hands a little more, and he's very happy with how he's doing. But what's your when you're calling Illinois games? Is there anything that stands out as far as an exciting call, exciting moment you've made? Obviously, you're doing it all the time, but is there a game or a moment or a call that you got to make as the PA announcer that kind of trumps everything else, or is it all good? Or
yeah, from a game, I would say the Iowa game to win the Big Ten, or the tie for the Big Ten regular season championship in 22.
Right.
The game was just a heck of a game.
So Kofi got that block?
Okay. On Garza. Mm-hmm. And we had two great Iowa games back to back.
Right.
Yeah, that one. And so the court storming and the confetti and all that probably, if I have to think of an Illinois game or moment, that's it. But there have been a lot of fun opportunities. Senior nights are always cool for me, whether it was Malcolm Hill or Io or Kofi, any of those guys who have given a whole lot, whether it's for 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
Those are always pretty special. When we officially opened State Farm Center after the renovations, when they officially named it Lou Henson Court, those are moments that aren't necessarily games, but that are pretty special to have been a part of. So.
Right. What year did you start doing Illinois games?
2015 was my first year full time. I did a few games in 13 and 14, but 15 was my first year.
There was a few lean years in there, but
few.
Is there a favorite? If you had maybe a Mount Rushmore of players that you've enjoyed since then, what is there a?
This won't be stats based, although
mine's not. Mine's not either. I'll give you mine after. So
I would say Malcolm Hill is up there.
Yeah.
Third leading scorer in Illinois history, I think.
And he's still working, man.
And
he's
still
getting 10-day.
And he was on the Bulls for a while.
That's true. Yeah.
So actually, he and I got to know each other way better in Chicago than we ever did in Illinois.
Really?
I don't know that I ever talked to him in Illinois. I just called his games for 4 years. But in Chicago, once he put 2 and 2 together, that I was the same guy.
Yeah.
Every day before shoot around, he'd come up and we'd talk for a few minutes about whatever. So
Yeah.
I love Malcolm.
Right.
Io would absolutely be on there too.
Yeah.
For me. Then it gets hard. In terms of just players I enjoyed watching and calling, like the actual call of their name was fun. Kofi's been a blast.
Yeah.
He was a blast, and obviously with dunks and blocks, there's a lot of times to say his name
Right.
very excitedly.
Yeah.
Trent has always been a big favorite of mine. I'm sure I'm missing people.
You know,
I'll go with that for now.
You know, a guy that is sneaky to me that I feel like he got hosed because of COVID there in 2020, and I really wanted to see him play in the tournament was Felice.
Yeah.
I just think he's just a stud, you know.
Yep.
And every good team needs a kid like that. That's just, it's not necessarily intangibles because he had good stats, but just smart. And I like guys that just do their job and don't showboat at all. And he's just, you know, he was all business. I feel like he'd be a really good coach down the line too if he ever wanted to get into that. But I feel like he was just born about 30 years too late.
Correct.
I mean, he'd be a top 5 pick in the draft if, you know.
For sure.
Yeah. You also did you do the WNBA Indiana Fever there for a little bit or no?
I did. I did do a few games for them, and then I ended up because I was in the NBA bubble for 2 months or whatever that was.
Yeah.
And then literally left the NBA bubble, got in a car, drove across Florida, and jumped into the WNBA bubble. And I did about 6 weeks.
Oh, did you really?
So I did. I did plenty of Fever games when I was there.
No kidding. I didn't know. Oh, I thought you actually were like in Indy doing the WNBA.
I did do I've probably done 5, 6, 7 Fever games.
Really?
Really, 4 of them that I did were kind of precursors to me becoming the Pacers guy.
Yeah.
They were trying me out, and I didn't really know it.
Right. Gotcha.
But, yeah.
That's cool. Yeah, and the Pacers, too. Okay, so who was playing for the Pacers there when you were there? Like
Started with Oladipo and
gotcha.
Bogdanovich, Sabonis.
Sabonis before he got traded to the Kings.
Correct.
Right.
Aaron Holiday was there.
Yeah.
Darren Collison was there that first year.
So they were just kind of on the fringe of play.
Yeah.
Kind of no man's land there.
8 seed,
Right,
7 seed, I think. Although they may have worked their way up to like a 5 seed one of those 2 years I was with them. But
yeah. Okay, so if you had to pick of all your gigs you got, if you got to pick one, see, I don't want to make it seem like you're picking favorites, but if somebody's like, okay, you do a Bears game, do a Bulls game, do an Illinois game, like what are you gonna?
Man, because I do so few Bears games.
Yeah, there's only 8 of them a year.
Right, the more. Or 9 certain years.
Right, yeah. Oh, yeah, that's true. We're up to 17.
And with playoffs, maybe, right?
Yeah,
And preseason.
That's true. That's
all
true.
that kind of stuff. So,
did you like all that stuff, by the
still-
way? Side note, did you like what they did with Caleb Williams and everything?
I'm very excited for the season.
Yeah.
Yeah, very excited. It'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. But if given the option, like right now, you can go do one of the 3, what would you go do? It would probably be a Bears game just because I haven't done that many.
Right.
I mean, I'm going into my 5th season, but
Yeah.
because there are so few,
Right.
And you've got 60-some thousand people there, and
They're nuts.
yeah, but like, there's no place like the United Center. Certainly, if it's a playoff or a do or die game,
Right.
And I'd say the same thing about State Farm Center on a big game.
Yeah.
that place is so loud, and Orange
Right.
Crush is fantastic. So it is really hard to choose.
Yeah.
I'm just glad there are very few overlaps, and I don't have to miss many. So
That's right. The Bears, I think. Do you ever play fantasy or no? Fantasy.
A little bit.
Yeah.
I'm terrible at keeping up with it, so
Right.
I tend to not.
I have a problem. I get too into it. But the Keenan Allen, man, that's a big. I mean, I know it's not under the radar because everybody knows it's a big deal. But from a fantasy, like as if somebody's played fantasy, he's like a top 10 guy every year. So.
And DJ Moore's no slouch either.
No, that's what. Yeah. Oh no, I agree. But you got 2 legit number 1s in my opinion. So, and then you bring in, oh shoot,
Roma Dunze.
Yeah, Dunze. Yeah. So yeah, it could be a lot of fun in Chicago here, but it was just a big deal about the Fields deal and all that kind of stuff. But
Yeah, and I loved Justin. I'd met
Yeah.
Justin. He was just as great a person as everybody
Yeah.
said he was. And I really, really, wherever it is,
Right.
want him to succeed.
Right.
And I hope he does.
he's probably thinking, hey, how come I didn't get all that?
I'm sure he is. I'm sure he is.
That's not the Bears are just setting it up, Caleb Williams, for success, and that's not, you can't say they can't pick and choose, but yeah, they're doing a great job of setting up that team for him. So yeah.
I sure hope so. I'm
Yep.
very
Yeah,
excited to see how it all plays out.
You getting to be the P announcer for like that team this year is one of the probably top 3 most intriguing teams in the NFL this year,
Yeah.
and it's not just like Chicago bias or anything like that. It's legit one of the most intriguing teams.
Yep.
So for you to get to be around that's really neat. But that's a little. I don't want to go negative, but the night that the Bulls championship team was supposed to come back this past year. Okay, how awkward. You were there, obviously. How brutal was it? How awkward was it? How
With Krause's wife?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was unfortunate,
Right.
obviously. And everybody has an opinion on what should have been done differently or better to make that different. My opinion is people were going to boo regardless of
Right.
who was on the board. As long as Jerry Krause's name was attached, there's a
Right.
group of people in Chicago who are going to boo and don't really care what impact that might have on any one
Right.
person,
Yeah.
including his widow.
Right.
It was horrible. I mean,
Right.
it shouldn't have happened. Could we have prevented it? I don't think so.
Right. You gotta mention them.
So I wish it were different. I feel bad for her because she clearly was impacted by it.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things
I
that
know. Yeah. But you were right there.
I
in the
was-
mix. Yeah.
sitting right there, dead center.
Man. Yeah. Well, and then Michael and Scotty, they're into it, so they weren't there. It's just
Correct.
it was just kind of a weird kind of a deal. But I think that you're going to get, when you get people, thousands of people, and there's beer involved, and you get this and that, and you get the things like that are going to happen sometimes. People are just got their mind made up what they're going to do. And then
Well, and The Last Dance obviously portrayed him in a
Yes.
fairly negative light.
Yes.
And
and who was in charge of that whole
Well,
thing?
sure.
I mean, it's
So
like,
all of those things together just left a bad taste in some people's mouths. And when those
Right.
people, at least some of those people are in the building, and you're right, have alcohol in them and are just reacting. Oh, Jerry Krause's name. Now
Right.
this is when we don't like him. And then his widow's on the screen.
yeah. It's just
yeah.
like in the moment deal, where it's, but it was unfortunate. But I thought I'd ask you because you're, man, right there. But,
Yep, I said out loud, not with the mic on, oh no. It was just like, oh no.
Yeah, it's
But-
brutal. But, well, let's see. Okay, let's go over some of your favorite players. Favorite player that you've had since you've been calling Bears games. Do you have favorite guys you pull for the Bears, things like that? Is there anybody in particular?
Justin was certainly high on my list.
Mm-hmm.
I started the year before he was drafted. And I've had the chance to meet him, and my boys have met him, and
Right.
he was just. I root for great humans.
Yeah.
That are also great athletes.
Yeah.
Great athletes who are. Thankfully, haven't had too many experiences where they're rude or just oh gosh. Whatever.
Right.
But if they're a great person, I tend to also
Absolutely.
root for them. Cole Kmet's another one.
Is he? Yeah.
He is just a great guy.
Yeah.
He's just kind and will spend time and is obviously a good football player as well.
Right.
So those are a couple of favorites. Watching DJ Moore play this last year
Yeah.
has been a blast. I think if there's anybody else that I've particularly enjoyed watching. Those three were the Bears.
or just people that you've interacted with that you're have like you just said with Fields and Kmet being really just very gracious and
with
things like that.
Football, there's a lot less interaction because I'm typically up in a press box and they're all down on the field.
Yeah.
I've worked some events that the players have been at, so that was my access to Justin and Cole.
Right.
Basketball, you have a lot more. You're standing right there with them all the time.
Okay, so then that'll lead me to Bulls. Any Bulls guys that You have nice, well, not that the ones you don't mention, you don't have nice things to say about, but is there anybody that...
Ayo and I chat, not before every game, but he'll come up and fist bump, or we'll talk Illinois real briefly. DeMar's been great.
Yeah.
Again, it's all fairly quick, superficial stuff. We don't, he's working, I'm working, so we're just kind of shooting the breeze. Javonte Green's been fantastic. He's a jokester, but it always has a great attitude, and so I was really thrilled with him back on the team at the end of last year. I don't really have too many bad things to say about most guys. All-star games, you tend to run into more people who are, because they're there for an exhibition, so they're not getting ready to play an NBA game that their career sort of depends on. So that's when you'll talk to, you might have a few words with LeBron or Steph or whatever. And those guys have been fantastic too. So I've been in a lot of really cool situations.
Oh, definitely.
Can't complain.
Have you ever been around Michael and Scotty, or have they ever come back? Have they come back to Chicago at all since you've been there?
Not to Chicago. My only time in the same building as Michael was in 22 for the All-Star game when we introduced the 75 greatest, and he was last. We weren't even sure if he was going to make it. He was. He owns a NASCAR team. And All-Star weekend and Daytona are always the same weekend. So he had just finished Daytona, got on a plane, and flew to Cleveland and got there just in time for this. So we heard in our headset, Michael's here. So we had a script if he was, and a script if he wasn't.
Are you serious? Really?
Because it's possible he's not there, so what do we do? So, but he made it, and that was the only time. There's been a couple times he's said, I might be there, or I'm going to try to be at such and such an event, but that's the only one so far.
Is there one, let's say if you could be the PA announcer for one sporting event, what would you
I've got a few things on my bucket list. I would love to do the opening ceremonies at an Olympics. I would love to do the Super Bowl. Obviously. And World Cup.
There you go.
Those are the three that I haven't really gotten to do. I've done some pretty big international soccer matches. But I haven't really dipped my toe into those three yet.
So. Well, I think just the fact that do you think it all do you feel like that YouTube thing is what really kicked everything off whenever with the Cubs, that because you were just kind of doing the radio and you just kind of said, what the heck, I'll do this. Is that really what you think kind of got it all in your brain and kind of kicked everything off?
There are two moments that I kind of go to that opened doors that I didn't expect to be open. One was that. It was just a joke for a radio bit, and I was doing... I'd been doing maybe some Illinois softball games at that point, but I really was just for $50 and a hot dog. I was doing it and I enjoyed it. And that really was like, hey, you might be able to do something like this. So that was one of them. The other one, and we alluded to it a little earlier, but after my first year with the Pacers, they went to Mumbai, India to play in the NBA India games against the Kings. They did 2 games in Mumbai and asked if I would go be the PA for those games. Of course. Get on the team plane. It was crazy how nice this plane was. It wasn't even their plane. It's just one they chartered for this trip. And we got there, and they don't have a basketball arena per se because they don't play basketball there very often. So they were converting this space into an NBA arena. And I went over with a few guys who were on the Pacers team, not players, but on the entertainment team, just to kind of see what was happening. And they were still pouring concrete outside. They had just chased dogs and goats out of the inside so they could lay the floor. It was they were putting it together at the last second. And they asked, hey, would you test the mic? They brought in all new sound and all that kind of stuff. I was like, oh, sure. Then I could have just done the check 1, 2, check, check, check. But instead, there's this big empty arena. I was like, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Mumbai, India. And I saw, 10 seconds of whatever my welcome was going to be. 5 minutes later, two guys who work NBA events who are in charge of putting them together, all-star games, international games, came over. Their names are Carlton and AJ. And that's when AJ said, "What are you doing in February?"
Yeah.
And that mic check in Mumbai led me to be able to do the Chicago All-Star Game in 2020. That was my audition then for the Bulls and the Bears.
Yeah.
That got me into the bubble, and ultimately 3 more All-Star games and who knows what else. So those were kind of the 2 little moments that turned into big moments.
Yeah, that's awesome. Just getting asked to do that, though, it's just a hell of an opportunity. Just like, just, hey, you want to go over? Yeah, that's great.
Well, I'd love to do an NBA Finals, but that doesn't depend on me.
That's true.
That depends on the team.
That's true.
So when I get asked to do other events, All-Star games, Big Ten championship games, NCAA tournament games, whatever, like those to me are more precious from a career perspective because it's not like me following the coattails of a great team, and I'm just there whether I was good or not. You're the guy.
Definitely.
These other ones, they ask you because they think you bring something to the table.
So the NBA All-Star games, then they just asked you because they just think you're one of the best. That's just they.
I mean, I won't say that, but they do. They've asked me every year to do that. Yeah,
that's how it works Is that how it works with the NCAA tournament and all that, or does that depend on the?
Typically, those arenas are kind of in charge of finding. They usually have somebody who works those arenas normally, so that's typically how it goes. I worked games in 2021. That's when the whole tournament was in Indy.
Yeah.
And they had me come do all of the games.
That's when fans first were allowed to come back. Yes.
And when Illinois lost to Loyola, that was the year.
Were you there for that? Was you?
I was. They didn't play that game at Lucas Oil. Had they been, I would have done it. And my expectation was Illinois was the number 1 seed. I was doing all 4 Elite 8 games at Lucas Oil.
Nice.
And so I was like, I'll be here doing the game when Illinois beats whoever, cuts down the nets, and then. Obviously, that never happened. But I believe I am the only person to have ever done all 4 regional finals in the same year. Because typically they're in 4 different cities kind of at the same time. So, but they were all in Indy at Lucas Oil. So I did all 4.
So like your schedule, I mean, it's not like you're on call or anything, but it's like things can pop up like that for you pretty much, right? It's a drop
some of them. Well, yeah, typically you'll get some notice, but you are at the mercy of NBA schedulers and NFL schedulers and NCAA schedulers. So once those schedules come out, I'm on my phone popping them all in and going, all right, is there an overlap? Is this a doubleheader day where I'm doing Bears at noon, Bulls at 7, or soccer at 1 and basketball at 6:30 somewhere? So that will happen. Like this summer, I've got 5 or 6 soccer matches that are coming to Soldier Field. So Argentina's going to be here. Real Madrid's going to be here. So I'll get to do those that are kind of unexpected, but I still have at least a little bit of notice.
Right. Have you ever had to, are there things you need to do to keep your voice? Like, have you ever had to cancel because you've lost your voice? Do you have to do things to protect your voice, things like that? Or because that's the most important thing.
Yeah. I you get a cold every once in a while, or feel under the weather, and so hot tea and stuff will help with that. Typically, I just have a little bit of water and a little bit of something carbonated, and those are the 2 things that in a normal game I would have.
I've always wondered about people that got to sit there for 3 hours or whatever, but. Yeah.
Well, you have to drink just enough to
keep
your throat lubricated, but not so much that you have to get up to pee. So
that's well, who is your favorite? If you had to pick a play-by-play guy to call, call anything.
That was part of another question. I never answered that today. Depends on the sport, obviously.
Right. Let's start with if you could pick. We're kind of wandering off of your actual profession and just kind of shooting the breeze now. But if you could pick anybody, any play-by-play guy, any commentator to call a Super Bowl, who'd you call all time?
Super Bowl. Boy, I know I'm probably in the minority on this.
I feel like there's a lot of good ones.
There are. I don't mind a Joe Buck called game.
I don't either. Yeah,
and I know a lot of people have are harsh with
Kinda
him, and I
soured on
don't
him.
quite understand why.
A lot of that comes from
Well, sure, the
Midwest,
Cardinals
but-
thing, and
which I still love him, even though I'm a Cardinal fan and I still love his work. I mean, so I think that when the Cardinals were really good and people would think that he was like favoring the other team to make it look like he wasn't really from St. Louis or something, but that's also
Yeah.
silly. I mean, it's just
Yeah,
ridiculous.
yeah.
Ridiculous.
So I wouldn't mind like him and Aikman. I think they're
great.
really solid. Burkhart is great.
I feel like Greg Olson did a great job
and Burkhart
too.
and Olsen are a great team.
Yeah.
If I could go back in time,
I know who I think I'd pick.
I would probably pick, not currently, but 10, 20 years ago, I would pick Al Michaels.
Yeah, he's
Just
great.
His voice and delivery. Tirico's great.
Mm-hmm.
Like, man, I don't know. I would probably, right now, as that stands, I would probably pick Buck and Aikman, I guess.
Yeah.
Who'd you get?
Al Michaels is great. You can tell this. I mean, he's almost 80, but he still does a great job. But if you get like a bad Thursday night game,
Yeah.
on Amazon,
He doesn't care anymore.
He doesn't care
No,
anymore.
no.
And you can crank. Yeah. But I always loved Madden Summerall too. I mean,
Oh, sure. Yep.
I mean, I thought they were amazing.
It'd be harder to have them now.
Right. True. Yeah. But I mean, I was just talking
yes,
like all time.
sure,
Like,
all time,
they'd be
sure.
up there. Right now, I think Buck and Aikman are very good. But I also feel like football has a lot. I don't know. I feel like they have more depth as far as really, really good
Yep.
announcers and play and then other sports.
Basketball, I'd pick Mike Breen.
Yeah, he's great.
I mean, I can't think of anybody else I would rather have than him. I mean, Kevin Harlan's good. He's a little over the top for
Right,
me.
yeah.
Like, everything's amazing.
He's a good team 2 or 3 guy.
Yeah.
He's
But I'd pick Mike Breen probably.
right. I would too. And then play-by-play, I feel like NBA that's tough because they go through. I thought Van Gundy was fine.
As an analyst?
As
Yeah.
analyst,
Sure.
yeah. But okay, then if I guess baseball's not your favorite one, but if you had to pick somebody to call a World Series,
Oh, gosh. I mean, I wouldn't mind. I've heard Buck do a few World Series too, so he would probably be on my list. There's a good stable of guys.
yeah. I feel like if we're going like all time, whatever. I mean, you can't go wrong. Guys that can do multiple sports like Buck and Al Michaels.
Bob Costas would be another one.
Costas was very articulate, but now soccer I don't know as well. But who do you feel like? Because I don't know that sport as nearly as well. So do they have a lot of who's a couple of their best
Yeah, I don't know what I know some of the MLS ones.
Yeah.
The one I've connected with most is Arlo White, and he did the Fire for a couple of years, but was sort of NBC's primetime game, Premier League game every week for a bunch of years.
Right.
And he's great, British guy. Just so the accent's killer, the phrases are
Yes,
fun.
I know. I love. Yes, I
And
love
he's
all
also the one that's in. He's been in a couple of TV shows too. So anyway, he would
Yeah.
probably be the one I would pick. Would be Arlo
right.
White.
Ted Lasso. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Ted Lasso was one of them. He was in. Yeah.
That's what I figured. It's like is soccer? How often do you have to come in as a PA announcer in soccer?
Almost never.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It's
That's
pregame and halftime. There's a lot of work, and in game it's cards, substitutions, and goals. That's it.
Nice.
And those are all fairly limited.
Right.
In football, I'm talking every 15 to 20 seconds for
after
4 hours.
After every play, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, well, I think I've gone down a pretty good list here.
Yeah, you did well.
Okay, so you said right now you pick one sporting event that you want to do. Would it be the Olympics, you think?
Yeah, I mean, it would be hard to turn down a Super Bowl if they were on the same day,
Yeah.
and someone said you got to pick one of these two.
That would be
It would
tough.
probably be the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
But I do think from a global, worldwide, and I know the Super Bowl is too, I definitely would love a chance to do an opening ceremony to the Olympics.
Right. Yeah, that'd be amazing.
Someday.
All right. Well, thank
So
you
if you
very
know
much.
anybody, let me.
Oh, yeah.
Connect
Yeah.
me.
If I know anybody in East Central Illinois. Well, thanks a lot for coming on, man.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, a fellow 96er.
That's right. We understand how old we are and everything else
Yeah,
around us is.
I do a lot of on this pod. We've done a lot of music ones, and I've done like one-hit wonders, like top 10, blah 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 from the '90s, and I think we can all agree that '90s is probably the worst decade of music.
It was rough. '80s were great.
'80s were amazing.
Great.
Yeah,
2000s are pretty good too. So yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
Yeah, but all right. Well, thanks a lot for coming on. I've told this before, but I wanted my son to think of a closing line whenever he was like 5, so this is what he did. So hang on. I got the mic down here, but thanks for listening in. That's that.